Thank you for joining my presentation today. My name is Diana Martinez, and I am a health education specialist and child passenger safety instructor for Texas Children's Hospital Injury Prevention Department. Our department is the lead organization for Safe Kids Greater Houston. Today, we will have a little overview on car seat safety and what we should or shouldn't do for our children when riding in the vehicle. Next slide, please. Who knows the law in Texas pertaining to child passenger safety? The law that we have is if your child is less than 8 years old, unless they are 4 feet, 9 inches tall, your child should still be riding in the appropriate car seat or booster seat. Lots of children reach the age of 8 and they're still not close to the 4 feet, 9 inches. So we always suggest or recommend that your child stays in the booster seat until they reach that height. That is when the seatbelt fits them correctly. Next slide, please. Guidelines that are put out from the American Academy of Pediatrics. What they suggest is that children should ride in a rear-facing car seat as long as possible, up to the limits of their child safety seat. This will include virtually all children under 2 years of age and most children up to age 4. Once they have reached the weight or the height of rear-facing, children can be turned around forward-facing. And they should stay forward-facing with the harness until they reach that weight or height of the seat. Most forward-facing car seats can accommodate children to up to at least 50 pounds or more. Once the child has exceeded the limits for forward-facing by either weight or height, child passengers should ride in a belt positioning booster seat until they reach the weight or height of the booster seat, and make sure also that the seat belt fits them correctly. Once they exceed the booster limits and are large enough to use the vehicle seat belt alone, they should always use a lap and shoulder seat belt. This is also a law that we have in Texas, that every person in the vehicle should be restrained either by using a car seat if they're a child, or by using a lap and shoulder belt if they're ready as a child or an adult. Another recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics is that all children younger than 13 years should be restrained in the rear seat of a vehicle for optimal protection. Next slide, thank you. Now we will talk a little bit about some car seat basics. So sometimes we think that we can hold a baby in our arms. I want to give you an example of what it would take to hold a child. There's an equation for the force that's needed, and it's mass times acceleration equals the force that we would need to hold on to a child if we're holding a baby, let's say in the front seat, and we don't want to put him in the car seat. So for example, let's say we had a 10-pound baby and we were driving around 30 miles per hour. That means that would take approximately 300 pounds of force for us to hold on to the baby so the baby wouldn't get out of our hands, out of our arms. That's pretty much impossible. One, because most times we don't drive just 30 miles an hour. And babies are growing. So as you can see, it's not that easy to hold on to the baby. So it's really, really important that we always have our children, infants, toddlers, even as they're getting older, in the appropriate seat. A 30-mile-per-hour crash has the same force as falling from a 3-story building and landing on concrete. So just with that in mind, it can cause very, very many injuries. It could also be fatal. So it's very important that we always buckle up our children in the correct car seat. There are 3 types of collisions. There's a vehicle, there's human, and there's internal collision. The vehicle collision is a type when a car crashes into another object. That could be another car, that could be a tree, it can be a barrier on the freeway, something, whatever the car hits, that's the vehicle collision. The next collision is a human collision. This collision is when the person in the car hits something within the car. Examples of human collision could be being stopped by the seatbelt, hitting the steering wheel or the dashboard, or if you're not buckled up or somebody in the vehicle is not buckled up, hitting another human. So those are examples of human collision. The last collision is an internal collision. This type of collision involves internal organs colliding with the internal skeletal structure. Traumatic brain injury can be the result of the brain hitting the skull. So this is just to give you an idea, a couple of things, you know, of the different collisions that occur when one is involved in a crash. Then we also come across, there's different stages for car seats. We have rear facing, which is recommended until the child reaches the weight or height that the seat allows. Then there's forward facing. Then we have a belt positioning booster. And then after the booster, we have the lap and shoulder belt, which is necessary for the safety of everybody in the vehicle. We'll talk a little bit more about these different stages coming up here in a little bit. Before, we'll start with a video. I can't hear the video.
Every year, many car accidents take place at speeds of 50 kilometers an hour or more. Children are especially at risk, and correct positioning of the child's safety seats is therefore very important. We will now take a look at what happens if your child is sitting forward-facing in a frontal collision. If the child is sitting forward-facing in a frontal collision, this exerts huge forces on the shoulder and neck regions, as well as on the child's head. This can lead to death or permanent injuries as paralysis. If your child is sitting rear-facing during a collision, the force will be spread over a greater area of the body, and there'll be less pressure on the neck and organs. If your child sits rear-facing instead of forward-facing, this reduces the risk of serious injuries and death by more than 90%. Children should therefore be seated rear-facing as long as possible, or until they are 4 years old.
Great, thank you. So as you can see in this video that we just saw, they definitely recommend. So as you can see by watching this video, it's definitely safer to stay rear facing as long as possible. It's more protection for the child's head, neck, and back if ever involved in a wreck, because once we turn them forward facing, their head is the heaviest part of their body, and that's what's going to go forward, and that's where the child can get head, neck, back injuries. So on this slide, as you can see, just giving a little differences between rear facing and forward facing. Infants and toddlers should remain rear facing as long as possible. Again, this is a recommendation from American Academy of Pediatrics, just because it's a lot safer for the child, more protection for the child if ever in a crash when they're rear facing. As you can see, when they're rear facing, the car seat does absorb crash forces, and the forces spread over a wide area of the body. So it's more protection for the child. Once we turn the child forward facing, their head moves or can move violently forward when they're sitting forward facing, if ever involved in a wreck. And it puts a large amount of stress on the child's neck. And like I said, that's where they can get head, neck, and back injuries, which could also be fatal. So, you know, you don't want to rush your child and put them forward facing if they're not ready, or if the seat that you use for your child still allows them to stay rear facing if they haven't passed that weight or height that the seat allows. So rear facing is definitely the safest, and we want to do that, you know, as long as we can. Next slide, we are there. Rear facing. So we have different types of seats for rear facing. Infant carriers are usually preferred by most parents. The carrying handle and the detachable base makes it easier to transport the child. Infant carriers can only be used in a rear facing position and until the child reaches the weight or height. And those weight and heights vary by car seat manufacturer. Most infant carriers start at 5 pounds, but you can find some that accommodate a child that weighs 4 pounds. The max weight of most infant carriers range from 22 pounds at least to at least maybe 40 pounds. And the height can range between 29 to 35 inches. So it all depends on the manufacturer, and it's very important, you know, to always check the instruction manual, check the labels on the car seat, and they should give you that information so you know how long you can use that infant carrier for your child. Now, once your child outgrows that infant carrier, the next seat is a convertible seat, which is the one that's on the right-hand side, the green one. And the green, or the convertible seat, I'm sorry, will also have a rear-facing weight and height limit. And then once your child reaches that weight or height limit for rear-facing, then that seat, you could turn it around forward-facing. The thing about a convertible seat, you know, some of them do start at 5 pounds, and some parents may want to use this seat from the very beginning, and that's up to the parent, you know, if they wanted to do that. The only thing with convertible seats, once you install them in your vehicle, it stays installed in your vehicle. You can't take it in and out like you could, or like you can an infant seat. So sometimes that's why parents want to, you know, go ahead and start with the infant seat first, and then they let the child, you know, get a little bit bigger, grow a little bit, and then they'll put them in the convertible seat, but still leave the child rear facing until they reach that weight or height that is allowed. And some of these convertible seats that are out there, as you can see, they have weight limits from like 30 to 40 to 50 pounds. It just depends on the manufacturer. So it is important to read the labels or the instructions and make sure you have the weight and height limits for rear facing. Next slide, please. So the next seat that we have is for forward facing. So once your child has reached the weight or height for rear facing, the next step or the next stage is forward facing. So there's different types of seats that you could use for forward facing. We want them to be in a 5-point harness. You have a convertible type that you could use forward facing, or there's a combination type of seat that you can use forward facing. The convertible, as we just discussed, can be used rear facing and forward facing. The combination type seat forward facing can only be used forward facing, and you can use it with the harness until the weight or height specified by the manufacturer. And then once your child has reached that weight or height for forward facing, then that seat, your combination seat, converts into a booster, because you can take the harness straps out and then you use it as a booster. But that's not until your child has reached the weight or height allowed by the manufacturer using the harness straps. Don't rush your child sooner than necessary to the next stage. It's important for their safety to keep them in the harness as long as possible, as long as the seat allows, without, of course, exceeding the weight or height limits. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have stage 3, which is booster seats. Booster seats are referred to as belt positioners because they help make sure the lap and shoulder belt are positioned correctly on the child. The proper position, the shoulder portion of the seat belt should come across the clavicle and sternum. And so sorry about the sternum, and it shouldn't cross or shouldn't rub on their neck. Okay, so it should be on their clavicle or sternum. The lap portion of the belt should rest on the upper thighs or hips, and this prevents the lap portion from coming across the soft tissue of the stomach. Using a booster also allows children to sit comfortable and allow their knees to bend easily. Additionally, just because a child is big enough for a booster seat does not mean that they should be in one. Maturity is a big factor in determining whether a child should be in a booster seat or a harness. And one thing that I can say also, car seat manufacturers are starting to put age limits also when using a booster seat, because like I just mentioned, we don't want to put them in a booster seat if they're too young, if they're not developmentally ready to just sit with the seatbelt. So we don't want to rush them to the booster seat if they're not quite ready. We want to look for a seat that has harness available for the child's weight if necessary, if the child is not developmentally ready to be in a booster seat. Now, the difference between a backless and a high back booster. A backless booster boosts the child up, extending their torso to help guide the shoulder belt. This form of booster can only be used in a car with an adjustable headrest. So your car has to have the headrest that moves up and down so the child always has head support, because the backless has no back, so there's nothing to support the child's head. So that's why it's necessary that your vehicle have an adjustable headrest so it moves up as the child is growing. The high back booster works in the same way, but has built-in guides for the shoulder belt. As the back is moved, the guide automatically adjusts the shoulder belt to come across the clavicle. A high back booster must be in a car that does not have adjustable headrest, or it doesn't need to have an adjustable headrest, because it has the back that moves up and down as the child is growing, and the child has head support. Certain high back boosters offer more side impact protection than backless boosters. So sometimes they give a little more support than just the backless. But they're still, both approved. And if you want the backless booster, just make sure that your vehicle has the adjustable headrest. And booster seats should be used until a child is 4 foot 9 inches, and most boosters can support children whose weight is up to 100 to 120 pounds, depending on the manufacturer. So earlier, I had mentioned that the law was 8 years old or 4 foot 9. A lot of children do reach 8 years old before they reach the 4 foot 9, but we always recommend that they stay in the booster, even if they're over 8 years old, if they have not reached that height of 4 foot 9 inches, because usually at 4 foot 9 is when they're ready to just use the seatbelt. Okay, next slide, please. So now, using the seatbelt, things that we need to look for to make sure that it fits the child correctly. The shoulder belt should rest between the shoulder and the neck. So we don't want it to rub on the neck. It should on the clavicle, like we mentioned before. The shoulder belt should cross the center of the chest. We want the lap belt to rest on the top of the thighs. And the knees should bend comfortably over the edge of the seat without slouching. So these are a couple of things that we can look for when, you know, you're looking at your child, making sure that they're ready to just use the seatbelt. These are a couple of things to look for to make sure it's okay that they do not have to use the booster seat. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about some misuse that we see when we're out in the community, helping families check car seats, making sure that, you know, it's the appropriate seat, that it's installed correctly. And one of the things that we do see is that car seats move too much. And when we check the installation of a car seat, it should not move more than 1 inch side to side or front to back when checked at the belt path. We always check at the belt path, never at the front of the base or top of the shell of the convertible car seat, okay? Another thing that we check for is the recline, especially for rear-facing car seats. Recline angles vary for rear-facing versus forward-facing and between car seat manufacturers. So there can be differences, and it's very important to read the manuals to make sure that we're following what the car seat manufacturer recommends or suggests. Rear-facing car seats need to be installed at an approximate 45-degree angle. It's usually between 30 to 45 degrees. The angle is very important, especially with newborns who do not have head or neck control, because if the car seat is too upright, the child runs the risk of suffocating in the seat. So we want to make sure that it's at the correct angle so that doesn't happen for the baby, and it's reclined far back enough so it's a good fit for the baby. Some car seats come with angle indicators, and those are there to help you verify that you're at the correct range, which is usually between 30 to 45 degrees. There's different types of angle indicators in the seat. Some have lines, some have little bubbles, some have a little ball. So it's just different things that car seat manufacturers put on their seats. But they usually, if you can use the seat rear facing, they do give you some type of recline indicator that you can see to make sure that you're where you need to be for that recline. If you're concerned and you're not sure about the recline, please reach out to an instructor or technician in your community, and I'll give you some resources later on. We could definitely help you with that and make sure that everything is correct for your baby in the car seat and the installation of your car seat in your vehicle. Next slide. Okay, next, we're going to talk a little bit about harnessing, and that's also very important. When a child is rear facing, you need to make sure that the straps are at or below the shoulders for rear facing. For forward facing, the harness strap should be at or above the shoulders. So that is the difference. Rear facing, it's at or below the shoulder. Forward facing, it's at or above the shoulders. The harness should always lay flat on the child, and they should never be twisted. And we should not be able to pinch the fabric together. As you can see there in the picture, the one on the left at the bottom where it says snug, we shouldn't be able to pinch the strap together at the baby's shoulders. If we're able to pinch it together, it's still loose, and we want to adjust a little bit more to make sure we get it nice and snug. And the retainer clip should always be placed at the baby's chest or armpit level. Okay, this is important to have the clip there at armpit level, because that is going to help keep the baby in the car seat by allowing the straps to stay on the baby's shoulders. Because if the harness clip or the chest clip is too low, the straps could come off the baby's shoulders if ever involved in a wreck. Baby could come out, or there's just extra movement for the baby that we don't want. So you definitely want to make sure that they're at the correct level. One more time, for rear facing, at or below; for forward facing, at or above the shoulders. And depending on the seat that you have, some put 2 different slots, some put 3 slots, some may have 4 or 5 slots. So it just depends on the seat that you have, but it is important to make sure that they're at the correct level for when your baby is in the car seat. And one more thing that I want to say about harnessing that's also important, as we get to colder months, if possible, it's recommended, suggested, not to put puffy or big coats on your baby, and try to strap them in the car seat. And the reason for that is, if you're putting a big puffy coat on your baby and you want to strap them in, you're probably not going to get the straps as snug as they need to be, because the coat is so big and thick and puffy. So if you can, strap the baby in with regular clothing, something, if you have a jacket, something light, something thin, strap them in, make sure they're nice and snug. And then if you wanted to, you could put a little blanket or the coat over the baby, but the baby is already strapped in. And like I said, that's very important to make sure that your baby's nice and snug in the car seat and stays in the car seat if ever involved in a wreck. Next slide, please. Okay, now we want to talk a little bit about modifications to car seats. We see this when we're out in the community. You want to be very careful, beware of car seat add-ons. If you put on a piece or a product that did not come with your car seat, you could alter the performance of the car seat in a crash. So you want to make sure that you're not adding anything to the car seat unless it is approved by the car seat manufacturer. So as you can see in this picture, they've added this padding, really nice and cute. But if anything were to happen to the baby in this car seat, the car seat manufacturer could say, you have changed the car seat, so it's not their responsibility. If you want to add anything to a car seat, you need to make sure it's approved. I would suggest calling the car seat manufacturer. There should always be a label that has a phone number on your car seat, and let them know what product you have, and they will tell you if it is okay or if it's something that they do not approve of using with their car seat. So you don't want to add anything to the car seat that didn't come with it. Same thing with putting toys on the handle. You want to be very careful with toys. Usually it's just you tie a little knot or it's Velcro, and the toys that are hanging from the handle, they're hard, they're made of hard material. So if these toys were ever to fall off and your baby's in the car seat, they could hurt your baby. So you want to be careful with what you have for your baby, because it could injure your child if ever they fall off, if ever involved in a wreck. And that actually goes for anything that you have in your vehicle that's loose items in your vehicle. If ever you're involved in a wreck, and depending on the force of the crash, these loose items can become projectiles. They can hit your baby, they can hit you and injure you or your child or anybody in the vehicle. So you want to be careful with loose items in your vehicle, but again, also with adding anything to the car seat that didn't come with it. Get approval from the car seat manufacturer first. Next slide, please. So here we see different items that we should look for, so we know that we need to stop using the car seat. So they shouldn't be used if it's expired. All car seats expire, every single one, from infant seat to booster seat, all the way to booster seat. They all expire. So it's very important to read the instruction manual or to look on the seat. They have different labels. Some car seat manufacturers give you the expiration date on the label. They let you know when it was made, and then they give you the expiration date. And it's important not to use the car seat after that expiration date, because if something were to happen and your seat is expired, again, the car seat manufacturer can say the seat is expired, it shouldn't be used anymore. So they can say, you know, they're not responsible because you're still using it and it's expired. There's different expiration dates depending on the type of seat, the manufacturer. So I can't tell you that there's just like a specific date for all car seats, because it's different. It can start from 5, 6 years. Some go 7, some go 8, some go 10 years, depending on the seat. So it's important to find that information on your car seat or in the instruction manual so you know how long you can use it. If you see any visible damage on your car seat, you should stop using it. If labels are missing from the car seat, you should stop using it, especially if there's one label that has a date of manufacture. It has the model number, it has the date that it was made. With this information, we are able to determine if the seat has been recalled or if there's any defects. So if we don't have this label, we can't determine if it's good to use. So if labels are missing, you should not use the car seat. If you're missing instructions, this one you could probably get online. So you may be okay, or you could call the car seat manufacturer and have them send you some instructions. This is not having the instructions is not gonna affect if ever you're in a crash or the actual performance of the seat. Now, if you have missing parts, that can definitely be a problem. So if any part is missing from the car seat, part of the buckle, part of the harnessing, anything like that, you should not use your car seat. If your car seat has been involved in a crash, you want to look into this and make sure that you should probably stop using the car seat. Call the car seat manufacturer, let them know you were involved in a wreck, and they can tell you if you should stop it or if it's okay for you to continue to use the car seat. If it was something minor, depending on the manufacturer, they may allow it, but some manufacturers are any type of crash, you need to stop using the car seat. So it just depends. So it's important that you call the manufacturer and let them know, and they can tell you. If your car seat has been recalled, if you have not made the adjustments to fix this recall, if it's something that can be fixed, you should not use the seat. That's why it is important that you register your car seat. When you receive a car seat, you should have a registration card. You can fill that card out and mail it in, or if you prefer, you can do it online on the car seat manufacturer's website. Having your information is important because if ever there is a recall on the seat that you have, they would notify you. They would let you know what is wrong with the car seat. And if there's a piece that needs to be changed out, they send it to you and you can change it out and you could continue to use your car seat. But if your seat has a recall and you haven't made the changes that need to be made, then you should not use the car seat. And lastly, if you're not sure of the history, if you buy the seat at a garage sale or a thrift store, you don't know what's happened to this car seat. You don't know if it's been involved in a wreck. You don't know what's happened with the seat. So you don't know the history. So it's not good to use the car seat if you don't know what's happened. So it's best for the safety of the child not to use a seat if you don't know the history of the car seat that you would want to use. Next slide. Okay. Here we're going to go over a couple of myths or misconceptions that sometimes, caregivers think, oh, I'm not sure that I want to do this or do that. So my child is too big for a car seat. So we've kind of gone over a couple of things that we need to look for to know when a child is ready to stop using a car seat. But until that time, we want to make sure that the child is in the appropriate seat. I mean, because there's seats for every stage: rear facing, forward facing, booster seat. Once then they've reached that booster seat weight or height, that's when we know that they can use a seatbelt. But we don't want to think that my child is, you know, too big and shouldn't fit in one until they reach weights or heights of the seats that they're using. Booster seats are unnecessary. We've seen that booster seats are important because they give the proper seat belt fit for the child. It allows them to keep the seat belt in front of them when they use the booster seat, because if they don't use the booster seat and they still need it and the seat belt is rubbing on their neck, what does the child want to do most of the time? Put the seatbelt behind their back or underneath their arm. And when they do that, they don't have that upper body protection. So in a wreck, that can be very dangerous for the child. So we want them to use the booster seat so they can keep that seatbelt in front of them and they are riding as safe as possible. Okay. Many parents use car seats outside of their intended use. That's something that, you know, we don't want to do. We want to recommend limiting time in car seats, child safety seats, because if we keep them in there for too long, it can cause delays, developmental delays. And depending on where we have the car seat, they could fall. So you don't want to use it only, you know, if it's not to be in the vehicle going from one place to the other. Don't keep your child in there for too long, for long hours if it's not necessary. Okay. And then perceived discomfort. You know, they're not babies. If they don't complain, they're fine most of the time. It's lots of times it's more us, the caregiver, that, oh, you know, we think, oh, you know, I don't want my baby to be, you know, rear facing anymore. I can't see them, but they're okay. They're comfortable. The seats, you know, fits them correctly. So we want to do the right thing for them and just, you know, leave them in their car seat until it's time to move on to the next stage. Next slide, please. So here you have some car seat resources, places where you can find technicians in your area, find car seat safety information, car seat information if you're looking for, let's say you have an infant seat and you're starting to look for the convertible seat, looking for different, you know, reviews. These are all different resources that you can look up and you'll get a lot of good information. You can go to NHTSA, safercar.gov, Save Kids Worldwide, and to find a technician in your area, you can go to Save Kids Worldwide as well for that. But locally, if you're in the Houston area, you can go to safekidsgreaterhouston.org, or you can go to Texas Children's Hospital as well, to the injury prevention, and you can get information there and find a technician closest to you. You can look at calendars and see different community events that are taking place. And you know, sometimes you need an appointment, sometimes you don't, but there's always information there that you can look up, and you can email or call the technician of that event and give you more information if that's what you need. So there's lots of resources available to help you to answer questions, and you know, do what we need to do to make sure our children are safe. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we have a parent resource, just a little more information as well for parents. We have safercar.gov/parents, and then we also have healthychildrens.org. So these are websites that you can go to get information. And also, as you saw at the beginning of the presentation, please, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help answer any questions. My information was at the beginning of the presentation, and please feel free to reach out and I will be happy to help you any way that I can. Thank you for attending, and always be safe.